Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Vale of Glamorgan Council Cabinet meeting of today, the 16th of March 2023. I'm Councillor Liz Burnett and Chair of this meeting as the leader of the Vale of Glamorgan Council and Cabinet Member for Performance and Resources. A few housekeeping notes before we start, and that's to remind everyone present that the meeting is being live streamed as well as recorded via the internet, and that this recording will be archived for future viewing. All participants should mute themselves when not speaking in order to avoid any background noise or feedback. And if any participant wishes to speak, then we can either raise hands on the screen or by using the digital function. The chat function should only be used to highlight technical issues or to attract the attention of the chair or Democratic Services Officer if there's any form of glitch. So after the marathon of the last meeting, today's should be less complex. So I think we can go straight to agenda item 1. And so I shall just go on to that. First one is apologies for absence. And I have 2 apologies today. That's Councillor Margaret Wilkinson and Councillor Bronwyn Brooks, who are unable to join us today. And I can see on screen that everyone else is here, so we'll just record those 2. Agenda item 2 is the minutes of the meeting held on the 27th of February 2023. Can I take those as an accurate reflection of that meeting? Lots of thumbs up. So Eddie was first, you're seconding, you're proposing, and Gwyn was second. So that's great. Agenda item 3, do we have any declarations of interest?
None formally received, Chair.
No, we've had deafening silence here, so no, we've got no declarations of interest. And then going on to the main body of the agenda, and so that's agenda item 4, and that's revenue monitoring for the period of 1st of April to 31st of January 2023. And I shall just get the relevant papers up onto my screen. So currently, there's an overall projected balance budget for 2022-23, and that's after a projected drawdown of 12.210 million from reserves. So we are using reserves, but we're using them in a managed and predictable way. It's use of earmarked reserves that were there for that purpose if necessary. Some of the issues have been additional pay pressures within some directorates. That's being met from an underspending in another area in the policy budget, and there's some drawdown of service reserves, as I said, which were specifically there for that. However, the pressure that we're experiencing in respect of school transport additional costs will need to be mitigated as the year end is approached. If you actually look at the executive summary, there is a very handy table there, and which actually explains the outturn by budget, and the total of that, as I said, is that the budget, instead of being 290.574 million, the projected outturn will be 302.784, and as I said, that's a 12.2 million drawdown or transfer from reserves. A more detailed summary of exactly how that all fits together is provided in table 1 in the report. It remains an extremely challenging position for the council, both operationally and financially, due to the ongoing implications of the cost of living crisis, inflationary pressures, and ongoing impact of COVID. But the emerging pressures during 2022-23 related to the additional pay award settlement, general inflation, particularly in areas such as school transport, cost of living, and staffing pressures. And as I said, it's managed through either through a drawdown of reserves or using underspends in other areas. An additional budget allocation of 1.5 million has been made to schools in 2022-23 as a contribution to the additional costs of the 2022-23 pay awards. That's the pay award for this year, which has been funded from additional council tax income projected to be received in 2022-23. So we are making use of some additional income that we received. And that's why, as I said, the base budget has increased. The report actually goes through some of the main variances within each directorate and a likely drawdown from reserves, and some of the larger variations that we should note really are that the current projections show significant drawdown from school reserves, possibly somewhere in the region of about 6 million by year end. School transport costs are also experiencing significant pressure and estimated to overspend by about 771,000. And that's due to a mix of shortage of drivers, increased fuel costs and additional routes that we're having to run. There are pressures on the community care budgets of around 900,000 within social services. And there's also currently a review underway to assess the currently hourly rate that's paid to domiciliary care providers due to the difficulty providers have in recruiting. So this, as it goes ahead, would put further pressure on the budget. Neighbourhood services and transport are projecting an adverse variance of about 2.175 million due to pressures from the 22-23 pay award, the market forces uplift to waste management drivers, the continued support to the council's leisure centre provider as a result of COVID, pressure on the recycling treatment budget and severe pressure on the highways pothole budget. These costs are to be offset via a drawdown from reserves and an underspend, again, as we mentioned earlier, within the policy budget. A projected underspend of 3 million within the policy budget will also contribute towards the Oracle implementation costs, schools transport costs, an element of this year's pay award, and additional market forces payments to waste drivers. Appendix 1 to the report includes the details of efficiency savings for 2022-23 and what the status is. I mean, we call it the RAG status, where we mark it red, amber or green. So that's Appendix 1. As I mentioned, Table 8 it gives a more detailed overview of the estimated drawdowns from reserves to fund both capital and revenue expenditure, and projects the balance on reserves for the 31st of March this year. The report also provides an update for the monitoring of treasury management, and Table 9 provides details of the council's loans, and the council continues to adopt an approach of utilising internal borrowing. So in effect, we have money in reserves. Rather than go out to borrow on top of that, we borrow internally from ourselves and pay it back ready for when that money is needed as a reserve. So that's in the context of extremely high interest rates if we were to go outside. Table 10 provides an update with regard to investments over the period of this report, which is April to January, April 2022 to January 2023. And table 11 shows the monthly average yield on these investments. So this report is coming to us. It's actually already been discussed in scrutiny, and there's been some quite interesting discussions in scrutiny. One of the things we mentioned about the severe pressure on the potholes budget, we've had such horrendous weather since the beginning of the year that there has been a huge issue, and that's caused an overspend in terms of pothole budget. People wanted to know what's happening next year, and as we discussed in the budget meetings, both in scrutiny and in council, the council continues to put what it's normally put into pothole maintenance, and that's about £1 million a year. We have historically put more in because there've been grants coming to us from Welsh Government which haven't been available as yet. I did say to scrutiny that, you know, there was an option that an additional amount in council tax, we could have done that at that time, because 1% will actually bring in about 850,000, which we could have allocated to that, but there wasn't an appetite for that. So we're in the difficult situation that we're having to prioritise potholes, which I'm sure Mark might have a comment on as well. So it is difficult. As I said, we are in a challenging period. Once we get to end of March, we will know a bit more about where we're going. I've got recommendations, but if I bring Mark in first.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair, for that analysis on that report. I mean, obviously, you know, we do have challenging times, and as you rightly said, Leader, that funding for potholes, you know, £1 million, you know, we've always done £1 million of our own funding for it, but in other years we've had funding via Welsh Government. Obviously, there was an announcement yesterday from the budget, and hopefully we're hoping for some more money, but at the moment we don't know that for a fact. Obviously, we'll be pushing for more money, but I wouldn't want anyone to be hesitant about reporting potholes, because potholes, if they're not being dealt with, normally get worse, and they do lead to issues. So it's vital that people do report it via Contact One Vale. Please do that. There's also a very good reporting service via the website. I urge people to do so, and we do prioritise the most urgent ones. I know recently we're doing some major work on the Barry Link Road, and there will be other places we'll be doing so. So, you know, work is still going on, but please bear with us. And you know, unfortunately the weather, you know, is not always with us. So yeah, thank you very much for your report, Leader, on that anyway, because it is really good. And what's so important here is that we do have reserves that we can use, and that is so valuable, and that's what reserves are for things unexpected, like the issues with potholes, and also other areas, you know, like leisure, for example, and the impact in COVID. So thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Yes, I think we could probably go on about potholes all day, couldn't we? But we'll save that, I think, probably for scrutiny. So recommendations before Cabinet today are one, that the position with regard to the authority's 2022-23 revenue budget be noted. Two, that Cabinet note the arrangements to offset the projected overspends in 2022-23 as set out in the report. And three, that Cabinet approve the revised 2022-23 revenue budget of 290.574 million, reflecting an increase of 1.5 million for the delegated schools budget to be funded from additional council tax. And I'd move. So Gwyneth,
Yep.
Are you seconding with your thumb up? Yeah, and then everyone else is okay. Thank you. So moving on, we're on to the capital monitoring for the same period, for the period 1st of April 2022 to 31st of January 2023. And if I can get that report up, that would be handy. So at the time of writing the report, the approved programme, capital programme, totalled 88.2 million. And that included budget slipped from last year into this year as well. If all the reports, if all the requests within the report to amend the capital programme are approved, then the revised forecast outturn is 79.6 million. So far, to the end of January, we've spent 42.7 million. And we have to say that the capital schemes are facing continuing challenges. This is partially due to significant cost increases, which means that sometimes we either have to re-engineer or re-tender schemes, which results in delays to projects. So that can sometimes be the cause of a degree of slippage, or there are long lead times on delivery of materials and a shortage of skills in some areas. So schemes are being closely monitored throughout the year to identify overspends. As part of this report, there is £8 million slippage that's been requested. Actually, it's quite often there is at this time of year, because we're coming up to the end of the financial year. And I think that what we have to look at is sometimes when they're education projects, if the Easter holidays or whatever, if work has to be done within school holidays, then you have to take it into next financial year. If Easter is into the next financial year, which it is, there will be the slippage will be reported as part of the capital outturn report. Appendix 1 actually details financial progress on the capital programme as at the 31st of January, and Appendix 2 is summarised over the directorates and sets out the approved budget as at the final proposals report that was approved in February 2022. The report details recent delegated authority requests that have been approved, and also notes the use of emergency powers detailed in Appendix 1 to the report. There is a new section in the report, and hang on if I can just find that. Yeah, it's on page 6 and 7, and it's paragraph 2.5, where actually it provides a progress update on the capital programme. And the table shows the percentage of schemes completed in progress and on target for completion. And so, for example, if you look at learning and skills, 50 of their schemes have been completed, 37 are in progress and on target for completion, out of a total of 104 schemes. So that's actually 84% of the schemes are on target for completion. What we need to do is, because schemes are quite often, if you look at the schemes that are outlined within the report, a lot of them have actually, initial works have been undertaken, and it's how far that scheme has got by the end of the year. If the end of the year was a couple of months on it, they'd probably all be on it. So it's not a question of have they been done or have they not been done. It's what degree of progress there is. So we will get that, as I said, at year end. There are further paragraphs that talk about the progress on some capital schemes, and I know particularly I think the young people of Barry will be very excited to hear about the Barry Library Makerspace. I won't tell the people of Penarth, but it's very similar to the one in Penarth, which has proved very, very popular, but probably bigger, and maybe with some more high-tech equipment, and that's going to allow people to use 3D printers and laser cutters and do all sorts of quite amazing projects. So we had grant funding for 98 million to fund the equipment to enable the building element, and that it will be staffed to help people to upskill in that. There's also the bus stop infrastructure grant, and again, I'm sure Mark will have something to say about that. Some high-tech bus stops, etc. The ULEV grant, that's relating to electric vehicle charging infrastructure at 6 sites in the Vale of Glamorgan, and that includes the Alps depot and civic offices. The charging units enable the council's electric pool cars to be charged using 100% green electricity, and that actually includes electricity generated by solar panels on the council office roofs. That helps us to achieve a fraction of the carbon emissions of an equivalent diesel or petrol car. The report requests to make amendments to the current capital programme, and that actually would include many slippage requests under each directorate. Some of the more significant requests include that to carry forward 3.272 million under the housing improvement programme, and 500,000 in respect to the new household waste recycling centre at Llandow, although we are committed to both. So looking at the recommendations, I don't intend to read all of those out. I will go through the main headings of the recommendations. and that is Cabinet is recommended to note the progress made on delivering the 2022-23 capital programme. The Cabinet is recommended to note the use of delegated authority as set out in the report. Cabinet is recommended to note the use of emergency powers as detailed in the attached appendix, and Cabinet is recommended to approve the following changes to the 2022-23 and future years capital programme, and laid out below that, going down page 3, page 4 and 2/3 of the way down page 5, are all the schemes that that are included. I would move, and then I'll bring Mark in.
I'm also happy to second it, but before I do that, I'm going to make a few points. I also like to refer members watching or other people watching this on our live stream to page 7 in particular on 2.8, which is the bus stop infrastructure grant. As you can see here, and I know that many people that have improvements to bus shelters, and I think it's something that we do like to do, or we always have difficulties finding the budget for it. But fortunately, we've got an infrastructure grant, which is terrific news. And I'm pleased to say that 4 ones are being installed in Barry, 1 in Dinas Paris, 2 in Cogan, and 3 in Roos. And that's an excellent. That means that the West and Eastern Vale will benefit from this grant on this. But not only that, it will encourage people to use bus shelters. So I think one of the things that prevent people sometimes using buses is things like bus shelters. So I think the more improvement we have in the bus shelter, the more likely that people are going to be using it while they're waiting for the bus. And I think the other thing is an awful lot of these bus shelters will have technology there that will enable them to see the timing of their next bus. I understand we also be going to, in the future, make sure I have live viewings. Now, what some people realise and some people don't realise is that actually you can, in fact, if you've got a phone, using an app, you can find out where your bus is due to come. And not only that, you can often find the registration number of it as well, which is really clever. And you can then know how long. And then if you're really obsessed, and sometimes I am, you can see how long it takes to arrive. So sometimes it's 5 minutes, then it goes down to 3 minutes, so you get 1 minute, and then you see it on the horizon. And I think that gives people a reassurance that the bus is coming, and I think that is really, really good. And the other thing I like to draw people's attention to, and I'm sure that young people, not just excited in Barry about the makerspace that will come, but also hopefully young people will be excited in news, the new Muga, which will be announced in Coulterville in the next financial year, and it won't be very long. And I'm really pleased that we are delivering that. And that's going to be a fantastic facility, very near the old Penarthians rugby ground, and that'll be well used, I feel, and it's very much needed in that part of Penarth. So those to me are 2 of the highlights. And the third highlight, okay, and I think we all use them, is public toilets and public conveniences, and that will be very much updated. There's a refurbishment going on certain toilets, and that's all good. So I'm really pleased with the capital programme. I mean, and it's very, very difficult. As the leader has mentioned, we've had many demands, and we've got issues outside our community, as we know, which have an impact upon materials and upon the supply of labour. Yet we're still delivering a fantastic amount of capital programmes, and I'm really looking forward to those programmes being developed in the next financial year as well. So well done to the officers on delivering those programmes. Lots of people don't realise how much hard work goes behind the scenes on those programmes. So I'm delighted, and it just shows you what the council does for the community that it represents. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. I admit, actually, my choice of bus stop for catching the bus into work very much depends on whether it's raining or not. If it's raining, I go to the one with the bus shelter, and if it's not, I can go to the other one. I do actually. I think you make a very good point there, in that quite often on these monitoring reports we focus obviously on slippage, and we focus on things that aren't happening, and that's conversations that we're constantly having within our directorates. But actually, to look in the current situation at over 80% of schemes on target and due for delivery, I think that's a phenomenal outturn by officers, and also some of the quite innovative schemes that are being put forward. So I think that's really good. I've got others that want to come in. So Rhiannon, you were next.
Thank you. Mark has rather stolen my thunder. First of all, the bus stops, obviously. I mean, 10 years ago, standing in the middle of London at 1 o'clock in the morning after a wedding reception, being able to summon up all the information about the public transport and the bus that we're going to catch coming towards us, I thought that was tremendous. And I'm really pleased to see that that technology is going to be, we'd be able to use that within the Vale of Glamorgan. I mean, I think that that's good, particularly when we've got young people or vulnerable people or women wandering around at night and so forth. And I think that, it should provide them with some reassurance. But obviously my main interest is in the makerspace, because I've been to visit the one in Penarth and I've seen how popular it is. And it's available for young people and adults who have kind of gone beyond school age and want to carry on having these hobbies, which would be very expensive to maintain with the equipment in your own home. And it's offering people an outlet for kind of creative talents and abilities. And it's so important. I mean, lockdown has shown us how important it is to have a kind of a rich life apart from work, where you can do things, take part in things, do crafting, go out and meet other people who are interested in the same kind of things. And I think the Makerspace is going to offer that. So I'm very pleased to see that that's coming online.
Thank you. And Gwyn, you wanted to speak.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. What Councillor Wilson just said about the bus stop technology will be particularly relevant in the Lantred Major area, because basically until you know exactly when the bus is going to turn up, because we've had huge problems, particularly summertime, with the amount of traffic on the road. The buses are held up because there's no bus lanes to the Western Vale, and subsequently buses sometimes are 15-20 minutes late. Having this information made available now will reassure residents waiting for the bus as to if there is a bus coming. So quite honestly, I think it's absolutely great, and I applaud everyone for pushing this through. Thank you.
Thanks. It's interesting because Mark was talking about the, I think you were talking about the IF app, which is the Cardiff bus app you can have on your phone, and it's actually quite interesting standing at the bus stop at a stupid o'clock in the morning, and everybody seems to be staring at their phone to see where the bus is coming, and whole conversations are around that. But actually Adventure Travel, that serves Llantwit, has also got that facility on its app as well, so you can look. The challenge is to get them all to work together, so you can just look at one app and see where all the buses are. But I think we're probably a bit away from that. But it is exciting, as Mark says, if you're really sad like us, that to actually watch and say, well, sometimes you can actually say, well, I won't leave my house quite yet because it hasn't left the town centre yet, which is a wonderful thing to be able to do. But anyway, Mark seconded, and as soon as we're also keen on it, I'm assuming that we're all in favour. Yeah. So moving on to agenda item 6. This is the use of the Chief Executive's powers. And as we know, this is a standard report that we have when Chief Exec has used his emergency powers to sign off initiatives that are either grant funding that we need to receive or contracts that we need to accept. And in a sort of a timely manner, and there are a range of things here, and there's a capital funding grant to support community focused schools, so that's really interesting because it's to support schools actually using their facilities for out of hours use by the community, and I think that's something that we've all wanted, and there are schools fairly well across the Vale that are able to do that. There's Mark's shiny new resource recovery facility at Atlantic Trading Estate, leisure centre works, Barry Waterfront, in terms of renewable and low carbon energy, and the Oracle, Western Vale Primaries, etc. So the recommendations for us today is basically that the use of the Chief Executive's emergency powers be noted, and I'd move. Yeah. Is there an official seconder? Yeah.
Happy to second.
Yeah.
Eddie, you're going to get in on seconding this one. Thank you. So moving on to agenda item 7. This is not me. This is over to the Cabinet Member for Neighbourhoods and Building Services. That's disposal of a small parcel of housing owned land at Black Rock House, Cams Corner. I had to look that one up. Thank you.
Okay.
Over to you, Mark.
Thank you very much, Leader. Yeah, there's a report on disposal of a very small parcel of land, okay, at Black House Corner in Cams Corner. Now, basically the issue here is that there's land which is deemed to be surplus to requirements on the Vale. We have obviously checked the detail of it. It's very much a very small site, and the neighbouring property is going to acquire it as part of their extension of their garden, effectively. I'm going to move now to the recommendations. Okay. The first recommendation is that Cabinet declares the parcel of land at Appendix A, which is where the actual drawing is surplus to council requirements. That authority is given to the head of housing and building services to dispose of land as shown in the plan at Appendix A under the 32 to 34 sections of the Housing Act 1985, subject to compliance with relevant legislative provisions. Any statutory consents required and recommendations below. Recommendation 3, that delegated authorities be granted to the Director of Environment and Housing and in consultation with the Cabinet Member, that's myself, and the Head of Finance, Section 151 Officer, and the Operation Manager of Financial Services to appoint an external valuer, provide a market valuation report for the land, and agree to the appropriate terms and conditions for disposal of the parcel of land, including but limited to covenant referred to 2.6 in the report. So there is a covenant on the land, okay, and for those who like to read that report, it's on 2.6, and that the housing relies on consent E of the general consent for disposal of housing and land 1984 made under the Housing Act 1985 for disposal, comply with legislative provisions and any statutory consents required, and that the monitoring officer, head of legal, democratic service be authorised to prepare and complete and execute the required legal documentation to formalise any disposal subject to recommendations above. So I so move.
Thank you, Mark. And before I could get in there, Gwyn had his hand up to second. So thank you, Gwyn.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, this is fairly straightforward. It's somebody can make use of a small parcel of land which is not of any use to the council, but actually is a drain on our resources. So yes, happy to support that. Is everyone else happy as well? Yeah, everyone else. So moving on to agenda item 8, that's back to Mark again, and that's the Household Waste Recycling Centre contract award for 2023-26. This report has actually got a separate part 2 report with the confidential details. So we'll just do this one and then we'll go into part 2 later.
Thank you very much, Leader. Yeah, this report is really concerning a recycling centre contract award for the period 23 to 26. And this requires us to look into the awarding of a contract. Now, the detail of the contract we will discuss when we're looking at under part 2. And basically what we're looking at is an arrangement at the Household Recycling Centre in Barry and Clandale. And because that was due to expire at the end of March this year, and a procurement exercise was undertaken by Sale to Wales. And we had obviously 2 organisations submit a response. So I'm going to move to the recommendation. The recommendation is, apologies, is that Cabinet notes the details of the tender process with the view of taking decision on the contract award via the Part 2 report later in the agenda. So I so move.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mark. Cool. Gwyn, you're off the mark today. You beat me to
Yeah.
it again. So that's seconded by Gwyn and supported by us. Agenda item 9 is any items which the chair has decided are urgent. And actually today we do have an item under that. And that is a report of the meeting of the local authority governors advisory panel. So that's to do with the appointment of local authority governors. And I'll hand over to Rhiannon to cover.
Thank you. This meeting took place on Tuesday and is a brief account of the appointments of various people to vacancies on schools within the Vale of Glamorgan. It was held so close to a cabinet meeting, and we're taking it now to ensure that those new governors are going to be in place as soon as possible to take up their positions and be trained, particularly considering the budget process that's going on in schools at the moment. It was very satisfactory. I was very pleased with the way that the meeting went and pleased with the quality of a lot of the candidates who applied. And I would encourage as many people as possible to get involved in their local schools. So I recommend that people accept the report, please.
Thank you, Rhiannon. Yeah, I'm happy to second, and I echo. I mean, we are really grateful to the hundreds of people across the Vale that give up their time and volunteer their skills and expertise to help our schools, particularly in the difficult times that we're in at the moment. And pleased that these people can come on board quickly. I understand that we've got quite a pool of very talented people that have come forward this time, so that's really good news. So are we all in agreement on that? Excellent. So that's passed as well.
Thank you.
So at this point, we do have, as mentioned, a part 2 item, and that would be agenda item 10, the Household Waste and Recycling Centre Contract Award 2023-26, but we need to go into private session as part 2 because of it being a confidential item. So I will need somebody to move part 2.
Move part 2.
Move part 2.
Second.
Right, so we've got 2 movers and 1 seconder, so I think that we can all agree that we're moving into part 2. So if the Cabinet Officer could let me know when anybody that shouldn't be here has left and that the recording has been stopped.